Hey, everybody, welcome to Downballot Roundup, where I introduce you to Democratic candidates running throughout the country in local elections. I'm Bryan Randolph, and I'm here today with Trex Proffit, who is running for the Pennsylvania State Senate to represent Senate District 13. Hello, Trex. It's great to have you here today.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on the show. This is great.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm a career educator. I've been 26 years, I think, total. 18 years as a business professor and 8 as a middle school teacher. And I tell you, middle school is a little more challenging, but I wouldn't give it up for the world. It's been fantastic for me. I switched in 2016 because of Trump. I decided I wanted to get closer to the young folks and maybe be a more wholesome influence over a longer period of time than I was able to do as a college professor. And again, it's just been so delightful every day. So much excitement and curiosity. It doesn't matter how you feel when the kids come at you. You know, you've got to put on the joyful face. And truly, I feel joyful when I see them. We moved here to Lancaster about 20 years ago, my wife and I and our 3 kids. We've loved this community, and, I just want to give back. As an educator, of course, a big thing for me is working with young people and investing in young people. And I always thought, I'll make my difference in the classroom, like a lot of educators. But I feel like this year calls for something more. And I suspect a lot of folks are feeling that same kind of call to action, which is so important in our democracy.
And why don't you tell me a bit about District 13?
Sure. District 13 is a traditionally very safe Republican Senate seat. It was redistricted slightly in 2022 to make it even safer. So we are taking on a long odds race here in what I would call a fairly rural district, but in a Pennsylvania sort of way. It's rural in the sense that there are many smaller farms. We don't have massive industrial agriculture here, but instead we have a lot of family farms throughout the county. And District 13 incorporates Lancaster City as well, which is about 10% of the population of the county. The district's about 262,000 total souls, about 134,000 voters. So I'm looking for 67,000 voters in this district. And I would say that it's changing a lot. This is an area that, with in-migration and a lot of the business activity and educational activity that's been happening here, we get a lot of what I call eds and meds. Educational institutions that attract folks, and also health institutions, the health system expanding into our area. So it's really a really dynamic area, but we're not scheduled to turn purple for 12 more years, according to the latest intel. And I say, I'm not going to wait. Let's do it this year.
Go for it. Yeah. All right. Well, what are you hearing out there on the street? Like, what are the issues that people are really pushing right now?
Sure. I mean, 2 big things, I think, are motivating voters this year, and they fall into 2 baskets. There's a lot of issues within those 2 baskets. One is, I do believe we have a wonderful and prosperous economy right now, but that prosperity is not being evenly experienced by the voters. And certainly around here, Lancaster has this reputation for being a very frugal population, and maybe that's like a lot of places around the country. And so when the price of eggs goes up and then doesn't come down again, people really notice those bread and butter issues. So folks understand that maybe some economic indicators are extremely positive right now, and we have benefited from wage increases and from at least the slowing of inflation down to close to 2% now, which is great. But that doesn't mean prices are coming down. It means they're just not going up as much. So under the category of economic development and economic prosperity, I think people want to see answers for them. And I think investing in our people and in our economy is something I can promise to do differently than my opponent. The second big issue, and I think this is really important for a lot of folks, is protecting our basic civil liberties and freedoms. And under that category, folks are motivated around here to protect reproductive health and abortion rights, access to the ballot, and the right to read and teach truth in schools. We've had a lot of school board fights here in Lancaster, PA. School board after school board has entertained the idea, and in some cases adopted, partnership with what I would call Christian nationalist organizations that are trying to, micromanage the education process. So people are concerned that the rights and liberties that we are accustomed to, especially post-Dobbs, in 2022, are endangered this year, and we need to do something about it at all levels of government.
As far as the economic policies you discussed, what do you think would be a specific agenda item that you could advance in the State House?
Certainly. I mean, we need to protect jobs with dignity and attract new jobs so workers have options. We want working families to be able to switch to a new job if it offers a better set of, combination of wages and benefits. So to do that, we've got to have jobs growth. The other thing we've got to work on is the affordable housing crisis, which I know is hitting everybody, but we have our own unique challenges here in Lancaster, and I feel like the state can do more to address the affordable housing issue. We need to streamline the construction of a lot of housing units, thousands and thousands here in Pennsylvania, and certainly in our district. And we also, though, need to protect renters who are experiencing, double-digit rent increases and can't afford that really. So what we need is housing stock in the long run at all entry levels so that everyone can afford housing. But we also need an investment in our communities. It's funny, the single biggest correlation with prosperity in a community is how good its school district is. And one of our goals in Pennsylvania is right now to make our school districts more fairly and fully funded. So that's another issue where I really differentiate from my opponent in terms of funding our public school system so that the prosperity can then accrue to the local community.
I think that's a very big one, and that's one I'm hearing from a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Do you think, are there any other major issues where you and your opponent differ?
Sure. On the education issue, he's a voucher guy. He has a billionaire in his pocket, or maybe it's the other way around. A man named Jeffrey Yass has given him nearly $400,000 for this campaign, which was not going to have an opponent until I stepped in. So I would say he's pretty much a puppet of big business and, Pennsylvania's richest person, a billionaire. So whose interests does he serve? The people of District 13 or just a very few individuals who have an agenda? And so my opponent has argued for school vouchers as the solution to the problem of perhaps some schools not performing as well as others. And we've seen how terrible that works out in places like Arizona and Florida. But here in Pennsylvania, we believe strongly, and we have a constitutional mandate to fund our public schools at the correct level and as fairly as we can. So we are addressing that as a state. And the funny thing was, we had a great education funding bill come through this past couple months in the budget deal. We had the promise of $5.1 billion and a 7-year plan to redress historic inequalities and inequities. And in the Senate, my opponent and his colleagues managed to cut that back so that there's no 7-year plan anymore. We're going to still fight it out year after year. And furthermore, he cut the $1.5 billion that would have been addressing that funding disparity in the first year to just 1/3 of that. I mean, it's like we had a full loaf, and then just for no good reason, he said, well, let's cut it by 2/3 because then I can say I'm in favor of fiscal responsibility. And he can also say he did raise the education funding. And I think that's the kind of disingenuousness that we're facing in these kinds of political environments where he really is in a pretty safe seat and doesn't feel the need to be responsive in a deep and meaningful way to the voters. And I'm looking to change that.
Good. All right, great. All right, so we are now at my softball question, which is my favorite question. I would like to hear from you. What is your favorite thing about your district? What is it about your district that makes it very special to you?
Yeah, there are many things, of course. As a history teacher, I teach U.S. history to middle schoolers and civics too. One of the things I really value about Pennsylvania and Lancaster in particular is just the tremendous amount of history we have here. There's so many interesting facets of this county and of this area in central Pennsylvania. Literally, as I teach American history in the classroom, we can just walk out the door and go see examples of whatever we're discussing, particularly around the colonial period and then into the 19th century. So it's really a wonderful place to do history and to see history. And I feel like that's carried forward in the people here, right? There's a lot of pride, I feel, in this district and in this county. And that's because there's always been a place that looked for progress while maintaining tradition. And I feel like that's always a great thing to do and balance. Right now, though, we have to make a little more progress. And so one thing I love about it is that history. The second thing, though, is that it is becoming more diverse here. So one of the things that's really interesting is we have that city versus county divide as to which is the more progressive and forward-looking area and which is a little more traditional, more conservative. So I would say one thing I value and that my family values is that we see a lot more diversity in terms of immigrants, in terms of different kinds of ethnicities and religious backgrounds here, and it's just continuing. So it's fantastic to see that, and it just means that we are richer for it. And I think what we want to do is expand that experience so that the whole place is much more welcoming and much more diverse in the ways that matter in a good sense for our shared prosperity. So that's what I'd emphasize at the moment. But there's a lot. I mean, we got great ice cream, and we have to dodge the Amish buggies as they go down the road. So there's a kind of quaint tradition here. And of course, everyone in Pennsylvania, they must love Scrapple, right? Doesn't everyone love Scrapple, or at least a whoopie pie? So there's so much fun here in Lancaster County. And also our district includes 4 townships in Berks County. So another very similar overlapping kind of culture.
Excellent. All right. Trex Proffit is running for the Pennsylvania State Senate in District 13. Thank you so much for joining me today, and really best of luck. I'd love to see you take this. You sound like you've got some great ideas, and I'd love to see you succeed. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate the time.
Thanks.